She didn't yell. She didn't argue. She simply said, "You can watch it online, Mom." And just like that, a daughter uninvited the very woman who raised her. I spent 30 years putting everyone else first. Raised 2 kids on my own. Paid for college. Wiped tears. Missed birthdays. Skipped vacations. Because that's what mothers do, right? And then one Tuesday morning, my daughter emailed me. For lines. She told me I could watch her wedding. Through a screen. Not attend. Not be there. Just watch. That was the day I realized I wasn't her mother anymore. I was her bank account. And something in me snapped. My name is Helen Ramirez. I'm 59 years old. A widow. I live just outside Santa Fe. In one of those neighborhoods where the streets are quiet and the porch lights come on early. For almost 20 years, I've been the office manager at a small law firm downtown. Nothing flashy but steady. And steady matters. Especially when life doesn't give you many do-overs. I raised 2 kids on my own. Elena, she's 32 now. And Marcos, he's 29. And I've spent most of my adult life making sure they never had to carry what I once did. Every overtime shift I took. Every weekend I stayed home to balance a budget. Every little moment I gave up quietly. It was all so they could live. Without the fear of not having enough. I never asked for much back. Just maybe a call on my birthday. A seat at the table when the big days came. Not out of guilt. Just because I mattered. But sometimes life doesn't send earthquakes. It sends emails. And when that one came in, everything shifted. She said they were keeping the wedding intimate. That Daniel's family wanted it small. They had finalized the guest list. And she hoped I'd understand. Then came the part that broke something in me. They'd set up a live stream link. So I could still be part of her big day. It'll be just like being there, she wrote. Like that sentence was supposed to soften the sting. But it wasn't just like being there. It wasn't being there at all. It was watching. From the outside. Like a stranger. Like someone who hadn't held her. Through every scraped knee. Every heartbreak. Every apartment move across the country. And the worst part? It wasn't even the decision. It was how she said it. Flat. Businesslike. No hesitation. No regret. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. The coffee beside me had gone cold. But I hadn't even noticed. Something shifted inside me in that moment. Not loudly. Not in rage. But with the quiet, unmistakable clarity that comes when something finally breaks. I typed 4 words. And hit send. Sure. Enjoy your big day. No exclamation. No sarcasm. Just that. I didn't need to explain. I didn't need to beg. Because something in me had already left the conversation. Not just that one. But all of them. The years of doing. Of giving. Of showing up. The long nights. The second jobs. The moments when I swallowed my own grief. Just to hold space for hers. And as I stared out the window. At the stillness of my front lawn. I thought about how many times I told myself it would be worth it. That love always circles back. That showing up would mean being remembered. Respected. Cherished. But now, I saw it. I hadn't been seen in years. Not as a mother. Not as a woman. Just as a constant. A presence. A provider. And finally, I realized something I hadn't let myself believe before. That love, even in families, can become conditional. That being needed is not the same as being valued. That morning, I didn't fall apart. I didn't cry. I got up, took a shower, and went to work. Like it was any other Tuesday. But it wasn't. It was the day I stopped pretending. It was the day I started remembering who I was before I was everything to everyone else. And for the first time in decades, I felt something new rising beneath the weight of all that silence. Not anger, peace, or maybe something stronger. Resolve. I remember the way the sunlight fell across the steering wheel on the drive to work that day. Oregon spring mornings have that low silver light, the kind that makes everything look more honest than you want it to. The streets were quiet, but in my chest, the questions wouldn't stop. How did we get here? When did I become someone to manage instead of someone to honor? At my desk the phones rang. Clients asked about deadlines. Life moved on. Like nothing had changed. But something had. Could feel it. Under my skin. My hands moved papers. Answered emails. But somewhere deep, a line had been crossed. Around noon, I walked to the bank. Miguel greeted me by name. He always did. Years ago, he helped me set up college accounts. For Elena and Marcos. I was proud then. Hopeful. I believed in laying foundations. In giving your kids more than you had. He asked what brought me in. I need to cancel a wire transfer. He blinked. The one for the Napa venue? That's nearly 50,000. That's the one. He studied my face. Like he was trying to read a story. I wasn't saying out loud. Are you sure? I nodded once. I'm not welcome. So neither is my money. We didn't speak after that. He processed the request. I signed the forms. And just like that, I ended something quietly, but completely. That evening, my phone buzzed again and again. Voicemails from Elena. Messages from Marcos. Their voices were tight. With panic. Mom, please don't do this. We need to talk. This isn't funny. But I didn't respond. I sat on the porch. With a glass of wine I'd saved for Thanksgiving. Elena was supposed to visit that year. But she canceled. Last minute. Said work was too hectic. I let the wine breathe. Let myself breathe. And for the first time, I wasn't bracing for the next request. The next emergency. I just sat. And the memories came. Not like a flood. More like a steady rain. Every skipped vacation. Every time I bought her shoes. But wore my own until they frayed. Every moment I whispered to myself. She'll see it someday. But someday never came. And maybe it wasn't supposed to. At 9 p.m., the doorbell rang. It was Marcos. He still wore his office clothes. Tie loose, phone in hand. Mom, what are you doing? Elena's freaking out. I opened the door. Let him in. Said nothing. He started pacing. Told me they needed that money. That Daniel's parents were furious. That this was not the time to make a statement. I took a sip of wine. I gave her 30 already. And she told me I wasn't welcome. That was the statement. He stopped. You were sending another 50? Was. He shook his head. His voice started to rise. She's your daughter. And I was her mother. A mother who was asked to watch from a screen. Then he said I was being difficult. And that was when something finally snapped in me. Not in anger. Not in grief. Just clean. Quiet. Certainty. Get out of my house. What? You heard me, Marcos. I'm done being the villain. In a story I wrote with love. He hesitated. Looked for a crack in my voice. There wasn't one. He left. The click of the door behind him was soft. But it echoed. Through every single year. I had kept the peace. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. The next morning, I opened my inbox to more messages. Longer now. More desperate. Elena's tone had changed. We'll lose the venue. The caterer might walk. Daniel's parents are beyond upset. Please don't do this. We can talk about you attending. But we need the funds first. There it was. I could attend now. But only if I paid. Not because they missed me. Not because they saw me. But because I was useful again. And that's when I knew. The door had closed. For good. I turned back to my work. Answered emails. Made copies. Ate my sandwich. To my desk. James, my boss, stopped by. Lunch. That new Italian place opened. I almost said no. But then I didn't. Something in me said, go. We sat over pasta. He talked about his grandkids. How exhausting. But beautiful. They were. Then he looked at me. Forgive me, Helen. But you seem lighter today. So I told him. Everything. The wedding. The email. The silence. He didn't try to fix it. He didn't offer advice. He just said, sometimes the hardest part of love is setting boundaries, especially with the people we've given the most to. He reached across the table and gently squeezed my hand. And for the first time, I believed him. When I pulled into my driveway that evening, the porch light clicked on, and I saw her. Sophia. Elena's best friend. Since 5th grade. She stood up when I approached. Still that same nervous energy from childhood. Like she had something to say, and wasn't sure how. "Mrs. Collins, I'm sorry to drop by." I let her in. "Made tea." She looked around the kitchen, like it held ghosts. Finally I asked, "Elena sent you?" She didn't answer right away. "She's a mess. The wedding's falling apart. She knows she messed up. She just doesn't know how to fix it." I waited. Then I asked, "Is there anything she can say or do to change your mind?" I thought about that. Really thought. No, there isn't. Sophia looked stunned. "Not even an apology?" "Words are easy, Sophia. Especially when people are desperate. Love doesn't wait until you cut someone off to show up." She nodded. Not defensive. Just sad. "I get it. Even if she doesn't." "I'm sorry, Mrs. Collins. You don't need to be. Some things are meant to end quietly." She left. I watched her walk down the path and disappear into the night, and I closed the door on her, on the old version of myself, on a story I no longer belonged to. The wedding never happened. Not the way they planned. They scrambled, rebooked, settled. I heard it was a backyard affair. Quiet, strained. I wasn't invited. And for the first time, I didn't need to be. In the days that followed, I made a decision, a new rule. If my presence is negotiable, then so is my sacrifice. Now I read, I garden, I eat dinner, without checking my phone. And I've learned something I should have known years ago. You don't have to burn yourself to keep others warm. Not anymore. I didn't tell anyone at work what happened. I didn't need to. The silence I carried in my body said enough. Some people wear grief like black lace, visible, deliberate. I wore mine like a well-pressed blouse. Neat, professional, but always just one button away from coming undone. The wedding passed like any other weekend on the calendar. No fanfare, no calls, not even a photograph. The silence was complete, and yet I felt lighter, as if somehow every skipped meal, every tear I wiped from a child's cheek, every stretch of my own boundaries had been placed gently on a boat and set off into the distance. Monday morning, James stopped by again. Same smile, same coffee. He didn't ask about the weekend. He just placed the cup down and said, "We all come to a line, Helen. Some people step over it. Some people learn to build from it." I nodded, though I wasn't sure which I was yet. That week, I did something I hadn't done in 15 years. I went out to lunch with a coworker, a younger woman from accounting. Stacy invited me after a team meeting. Normally, I'd decline, say I had errands, or just retreat to my desk with a Tupperware of leftovers. But something in her tone, gentle, curious, made me say yes. Over soup and sourdough, she told me about her mother, how they talk every Sunday, how they still argue about politics, but always say "I love you" before hanging up. "She drives me crazy sometimes," she said, laughing, "but I'd be lost without her." I smiled, quietly. Then I asked her, without meaning to, "What do you think happens when a mother stops being useful?" She blinked, took a long breath, then said, "I think if she was only useful, she was never really seen." Her words stayed with me long after I returned to my desk. That evening, I went home and opened a drawer I hadn't touched in years. Inside were stacks of birthday cards, some hand-drawn by Elena and Marcos when they were small. One said "Best Mom in the Galaxy" in crooked purple marker. Another had a drawing of a cat flying a rocket. I used to keep every card like it was proof, evidence that all the giving wasn't invisible. But even memories age, ink fades, paper yellows, and the promises made by children, promises to always visit, always love, never forget, get rewritten by adulthood. I didn't cry. I just returned the cards to the drawer and shut it. Later that week, Marcos called. I let it ring 4 times before picking up. "Hi, Mom." "Hi." There was a long pause. One of those pauses, filled with everything we weren't saying. I heard it was small. The wedding, I said. Yeah. Did you go? For a little while. It was fine. I waited. I didn't want to take sides. He said finally, you don't have to. I'm not at war with anyone. Elena's upset. I imagine she is. Another silence. Then quietly, are you okay? The question surprised me. I thought for a moment, then answered honestly, I think I'm becoming okay. But it's different. It's not the kind of okay you feel when things are fixed. It's the kind you earn after accepting they won't be. He didn't reply, but I heard him breathing. I could picture him, still in his work shirt, sitting on the edge of his couch, unsure of what to say next. And then softly, I'm sorry, Mom, for the things I didn't see. I didn't say thank you. I didn't say it's okay. I just let the words sit between us. 'Cause sometimes, silence is the only container big enough for truth. That night, I dreamed of water, of a lake I used to visit as a girl, the kind of dream that feels more like a memory than fiction. I stood at the edge, barefoot, watching ripples stretch across the surface, and I remember thinking, even in the dream, this is what healing feels like. Stillness, not joy. A week later, I started a pottery class, Thursday nights. 10 women, all older, all with stories they only told in fragments, between shaping clay and wiping their hands on aprons. Marianne had lost her husband 2 years ago. Linda was caring for a sister with dementia. And Trina? She just wanted to make something with her hands. That couldn't be undone by email or silence. I liked that. I liked the mess, the weight of the wheel turning, the way clay resisted, then softened. Few stayed patient. I made bowls, bad ones at first, uneven edges, lopsided curves, but there was something beautiful in it, something whole, in the imperfect. During break one evening, Trina said, you always seem like someone who's lived 2 lives, one for others, one for yourself. I didn't answer, but later, as I shaped a new piece, with damp fingers, I realized she was right, and maybe I was finally starting the second one. Elena emailed once more. A long letter. Emotional. Rambling. Half apology. Half defense. She said she'd panicked. That Daniel's parents had insisted. That she felt torn. That she never meant to hurt me. But intentions don't erase impact. I read it once, then archived it. Not out of anger, but because I didn't need it anymore. Some people say forgiveness is the final step, but I think sometimes peace arrives without it. Sometimes the absence of bitterness is enough. It's been 3 months. I still go to pottery. I still sit on my porch some evenings, wine in hand, watching the sky change color. I talk to Marcos once a week. He's trying. I can feel it. And I meet friends for dinner. We talk about books, not family. And for once, I don't feel like a supporting character in someone else's life. I've learned something strange and beautiful, that there's a kind of joy in choosing yourself, in building something small and quiet that doesn't rely on anyone else's recognition to feel real. I used to think love meant giving until you were empty, but now I know this. True love, the lasting kind, is the love that begins at home. The one you show yourself. The kind that says, I see you, even when they didn't. And that kind, it's not just like being there. It's being whole. Finally. And fully. The first time I saw Elena again, it wasn't planned. I was walking through the Saturday market downtown, picking up a loaf of rosemary bread, listening to a busker play something soft and sad on his guitar. The kind of melody that slips under your ribs and makes you remember things you'd rather forget. And then I heard her voice behind me. Not loud, not angry, just real. Mom. I turned, and there she was. No wedding gown, no champagne flute, just a young woman who suddenly looked too small for the world she tried to control. She stepped closer, her eyes red, her posture unsure. She looked at the bread in my hand and said, "You still get the rosemary kind." I nodded. We stood in silence as people moved around us. Families, couples, strollers. A normal Saturday for everyone else. Finally, she said, "Can we talk?" I looked at the bench nearby, then at her. "Here's fine." We sat. She took a breath, then launched into a version of the truth I already knew. She hadn't wanted to hurt me. Daniel's parents were difficult. The pressure was immense. She'd made a mistake. Terrible, selfish mistake. I listened. Not with judgment. Not with the kind of sympathy that folds into guilt. Just presence. Steady. Quiet. Then she said something I didn't expect. "I thought you'd always forgive me. That no matter what I did, you'd still show up." There it was. The real wound. The assumption that I was eternal, unmovable, that I could be stretched, erased, diminished, yet remain solid. And I understood. Not because it was right, but because I had taught her that. Every time I gave without being thanked. Every time I showed up when I should have set a boundary. Every time I swallowed my own feelings to protect hers, I reinforced the idea that love meant self-erasure. So I looked at her, really looked, and said, "I taught you to believe that, and I'm sorry for that part. But I can't be what I was. I won't." Her eyes filled. Not the kind of tears that beg, just the kind that say, "I hear you." Finally, she asked if we could try again. Build something new. No strings. I said we could try, but that trying would look different now. Means I won't say yes. Just because it's easier. It means I won't rescue you from things you created. She nodded. We didn't hug. That would have been too easy. Too neat. Instead, we sat there a while longer, watching a balloon vendor argue with a toddler about colors. It was ordinary, and strangely enough, after that, she started calling once a week. Short calls, sometimes awkward, but real. She told me about work, about how things with Daniel weren't as perfect as she'd pretended, about therapy. One evening, she asked if I wanted to come to her apartment for dinner. Just her. No guest list. I said yes. I brought a bottle of wine and a store-bought pie. When I walked in, she looked at me like I was someone new, or maybe someone ancient. The mother she'd buried under her own expectations, now standing there, unbent. Dinner was simple. Pasta. Garlic bread. We laughed. Slowly, careful not to fall into old roles. After dessert, she asked, "Do you think we'll ever go back to how it was?" I shook my head. I hope not, because how it wasn't real. It was obligation, dressed as closeness, dependence, confused for love. Now, we're something quieter, truer. Marcos visits more. Sometimes he brings groceries, sometimes takes me to brunch. He talks about guilt, in small doses, like medicine. I tell him I don't want guilt. I want change. He's trying. Elena called last week to say she's joining a volunteer project, mentoring young women from single-parent households. She said she thought of me when she signed up. I smiled. In pottery class, I'm making cups now. They're harder than bowls, less forgiving. One wrong angle, and the whole thing collapses. But when they hold, when they take shape just right, they feel solid in the hand. Useful, beautiful, the kind of thing that doesn't look like much from far away, but up close, it holds everything. I was raised in a world where parents stayed silent, and children were expected to notice. We didn't say I love you. We showed it by ironing uniforms, by packing lunches, by sitting quietly at the table until the storm passed. So I became a woman who thought love meant showing up and shutting up, that if you gave enough, someone would see you, that if you kept everything together, one day they'd thank you for the pieces they never saw you carry. But today's world doesn't work that way. In this world, love speaks loudly. Boundaries are buzzwords. Forgiveness comes with disclaimers. And parents, we're no longer sacred. We're optional. I hear people say things like, cut off toxic family, like it's as simple as deleting a file. But what no one talks about is how it feels to be the file, to be archived, to be opened only when needed, to be shut without warning. I used to think Elena's distance was personal, that I had failed as a mother. Now, I see it differently. It wasn't just me. It was the space between generations. A bridge built on different languages of love. Mine was sacrifice. Hers autonomy. Mine was presence. Hers performance. So I stopped speaking in a language she no longer heard. And I started translating my life into one I understood. I deleted the family calendar, the one I used to track their lives. Like mine didn't matter. I took their birthdays off my planner and added new ones. Mine, my sister's, my friend Marie's, who always remembers, my favorite candle scent. I unsubscribed from the newsletters they never read and signed up for one that sends me a new poem every Monday. Small things, quiet changes, but they add up. Last week, I spent a Saturday at the coast. Just me, a windbreaker, and a book I'd been meaning to read since 1998. I watched the tide come in, watched children run, barefoot, through the foam. No one needed anything from me, and I didn't feel useless. Felt complete. There's a phrase I came across in that book, emotional rewilding. It means returning to a natural state after being domesticated by expectation. That's what I'm doing now. Rewilding. Letting the parts of me that had grown small and polite become unruly again. Curious. Soft in some places, sharp in others. I keep a notebook now. Nothing fancy. Just a small leather one I found at a yard sale. I write down things I wish someone had told me at 30, at 40, even at 55. Things like, love is not a currency. Silence is not the same as peace. You can forgive someone and still keep the door locked. Being seen starts with seeing yourself. Maybe one day I'll give it to Elena, or maybe not. Maybe it's enough that I'm reading it to myself. Now, the thing about walking away is, first, feels like failure. You second guess. You replay old conversations. You search your memory for that one moment. You could have done something differently, softer, wiser, earlier. But then, the quiet sets in, not the silence of being shut out. That's loud in its own way. No, this is different. It's the quiet of being alone without being lonely. The quiet of waking up and not bracing for the next emotional invoice. And when you've lived long enough, that kind of peace feels like a revolution. It's been 4 months since the wedding that wasn't. And life looks simple now. Not less full, just less tangled. I go to work. I come home. I water the plants I used to forget. I walk in the evenings with no destination in mind. And people ask, are you okay? And I say, I'm more than okay. I'm awake. Not in the buzzy spiritual sense, but in the lived real way, where your body doesn't flinch when the phone rings, where you no longer rehearse every conversation in your head. Marcos and I talk. He's different now. Not perfect, but present. He brings coffee sometimes, helps me move furniture when I get one of my sudden decorating impulses, and he listens. Elena is quieter, still working through things, still trying to figure out how to build a bridge without asking me to carry all the weight. I don't rush her. I don't chase her. Love, when it's real, finds its own pace. She sent me a postcard last week. No big words, no apology, just a photo of a ceramic cup she saw in a museum. Thought of you, she wrote. I smiled, because that's all I needed. Not grand gestures, just a moment of seeing. Sometimes, I think about who I was before all of this, before the wedding, the wire transfer, the porch-light conversations. And I feel a strange tenderness for that woman, the one who gave and gave, hoping that someday someone would give back. She didn't know yet that the giving would never be enough, that her worth wasn't measured by how many times she could bend without breaking. But I know now, and I hope, if someone is listening, someone sitting at their own kitchen table with cold coffee and questions that won't let go, I hope they know this. You are allowed to stop showing up for people who only notice when you disappear. You are allowed to ask, "What about me?" You are allowed to say no, not in anger, but in grace. And most of all, you are allowed to begin again, not with a bang, but with a whisper that says, "I'm still here, and this time, I choose me." What about you? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.